Hi, I'm Marcus and I'm a Shakuhachi player. This is a shakuhachi. It's a traditional Japanese flute that is made from bamboo. It originated in China and came to Japan in about the 7th century. And its history in Japan is very much intertwined with the so-called komuso, the monks of emptiness and nothingness. The komuso used the shakuhachi not as a musical instrument mainly, but as a tool for meditation. But that's actually a rather long story, and if you ask a Japanese person, there is still a very strong association of the shakuhachi with the komuso. But as this is a very long story, maybe this is the stuff for another video. The name shakuhachi comes from its length. It is 1 shaku and 8 sun long, this standard version of the flute. A shaku is a traditional Japanese unit of measurement. It is about 1 foot in today's measurements. And a sun is 1/10 of a foot. So a shakuhachi is 1 shaku and 8 sun. So this is about 1 foot and 8/10 of a foot, which is about 55 centimeters or 21.5 inches long. These days, shakuhachi are made in various lengths, much longer shakuhachi, also very short shakuhachi, but the name stays the same. So you don't say ni shaku yonsun or something like that for a long flute, for example. In addition to bamboo, there are also flutes made from other materials these days. You can get flutes made from wood or from plastic, all kinds of plastic, some forms of resin, and you can even make quite good sounding flutes just from plumbing pipe. And what's a bit frustrating is that these flutes already sound very good, so for a beginner they are really good flutes, but nothing really beats the sound of a bamboo shakuhachi, a really well-made bamboo shakuhachi. This type of flute goes back to prehistoric times. Although flutes made from wood or perishable materials don't exist anymore, or at least they have not been found yet, we have some flutes made of bone or of stone. And the overall construction of these flutes is really very similar to this type of flute. The shakuhachi is an end-blown flute, so you hold it like this, and this is where you blow the flute. The root part, so this is the bottom part of a bamboo stalk. And usually in flutes, the root ends are left on. So in this flute, for example, you can see the root end is still there and you can see where it was in the ground. But this is really left on for decoration and it doesn't have any influence on the sound. Historically, shakuhachi were made from all parts of the bamboo stalk, and some makers still do that. But the most common type of construction these days is that you take the root part of a bamboo stalk and you take ideally the first 7 notes to make a shakuhachi. As you can see, it doesn't have a headpiece. So most of you will be familiar with a very famous Western instrument that is actually very similar in construction to the shakuhachi. And that is this instrument. I know some of you have quite bad childhood memories of having to learn the recorder. It's actually a very, very nice instrument. If you want to learn more about the recorder, I recommend that you check out the Team Recorder YouTube channel. There are very, very nice videos about the recorder and what an awesome instrument it is.
Playing the recorder is made up of 3 elements. That is your air, your fingers and your tongue.
I bring this up because the recorder actually is not very dissimilar to the shakuhachi. The main difference is that in a shakuhachi you don't have this headpiece, this mouthpiece. So the function of this headpiece in a recorder is that it directs the airstream to this bit here, the labium, which is where the tone is produced. So if you blow into a recorder, the airstream is directed directly here. In a shakuhachi, there is no headpiece, so this actually makes it a bit tricky to start learning the instrument, because you have to learn to make a shape with your mouth so that you direct the airstream towards this bit here, the blowing edge, or the utaguchi in Japanese. So in a sense, the shakuhachi really is a recorder. Sorry, Zach.
My name's Zach Zinger, and this is not a recorder.
So having to form the airstream with your mouth is a bit tricky, but it allows you also a great degree of freedom. You can play quite clean tones on the shakuhachi, something like this. It's not Western flute tone clean, because this is a natural material after all, so it is quite rough. But this would be a quite clean tone on the shakuhachi. But you can produce also very rough tones, for example, like this. And you can play around with where the noise starts and where the tone begins, and where the tone stops and the noise begins. There are two main types of shakuhachi. The one type has lacquer inside. So like this flute here, you can see the black lacquer inside. This is called urushi, and this is the same lacquer that you find on Japanese artisan boxes and things like that. The function of this urushi is to make the tone louder and a bit cleaner, a bit clearer. So that, for example, if you want to perform in a concert hall, it's really much easier to play on a flute that has this urushi. These flutes are called jiari, so they have ji, the lacquer. But there are also flutes that don't have this lacquer. They are called nashi, so they don't have the ji inside. And these flutes have a slightly more mellow tone, a more natural tone, but they're also quieter. It's really a personal preference if the player prefers to play on jiari or jinashi flutes, and there is no right shakuhachi really. The shakuhachi has 5 folds. There are 4 in the front, 2, 3, 4, and 1 in the back. So this means it is a pentatonic flute. Just by opening and closing the holes, you can produce 5 notes. And back again, 1 octave higher. In the standard shakuhachi, that is 1 shaku and 8 sun long, the lowest note is a D. That's the D above middle C. And then we have F, G, A, C, and again D. The actual Japanese symbols are different. They are taken from the katakana alphabet. Ro, tsu, re, chi, di, and again Ro. The traditional shakuhachi plays 2 octaves, although modern flutes sometimes can play the complete 3rd octave as well. But that is actually quite tricky, and most of the traditional repertoire really only uses the bottom 2 octaves, plus a few half tones above that. So as I just explained, it's a pentatonic flute, so just by opening the holes, you can only produce 5 notes. But as you may have noticed, the holes are actually quite big. So again, if you compare this to the recorder, these holes are really very big. And one of the reasons, or the main reason for that, is that you can half hole. So for example, actually by doing this, you can produce any frequency really. This is one way in which you can produce additional notes, additional frequencies on the shakuhachi. The other is meri kari, and this means you change the angle in which you blow into the flute. So this meri kari system, meri means going down and kari means going up, gives the shakuhachi a lot of its characteristic sound, because the meri notes you have to play softer, you have to play quieter. This variability in pitch also means that controlling pitch is another big topic for playing shakuhachi, because in particular if you're playing with other people, you want to have the same pitch as the other people, so you have to be able to produce the correct pitch on the flute. However, the shakuhachi was a solo instrument. I mentioned the komuso earlier, and they really only played this for themselves and always as a solo instrument. So for them, tuning was not really very important. But once the shakuhachi was used to play together with other people, with other instruments, of course this became a very important issue. So there are really two things that stand out for playing shakuhachi. One is that you have a very wide range of tone colors that you can produce, many different sounds. The other is that you can produce any pitch, and like with all wind instruments or with many other instruments as well, you can develop a tone over time. So in that, it is, for example, quite a different type of instrument than a piano, where you only hit the string and then it starts to vibrate and you don't have any control over it anymore. And also the range of the sounds that you can produce is very limited. Of course, the piano has other advantages, like you can play multiple notes at the same time, which in a shakuhachi is not really possible, or only by cheating a bit. So this is just a brief introduction to the shakuhachi. It's a very rich instrument. There is a long history to the instrument, a lot to learn about all techniques, about very fine nuances in technique. It's a lifelong endeavor, as with any other musical instrument. If you find this interesting, please get in touch. I'm always happy to talk about shakuhachi. Also, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment down below. As always, I know you hear this for every YouTube video, but it really makes a difference and I would really appreciate this. And I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Thank you.